Frankly, I'm a little surprised to be included in this group of distinguished honorees, and not least among which is Frank. He's a very tough act to follow. So however my selection may have occurred, it would not have been even conceivable without the extraordinary mentors and partners I have had along the way. Foremost among these was the late Professor Harvey Goldschmidt, who made me a competent law student, maybe successful, but only as a result of him. Alan Applebaum at Cleary Gottlieb, who made me a competent lawyer. And throughout all of it, my father, Ira, who really one of the best legal minds in the country, has always been there for me to hash things out with. And last but not least, in re-engaging with the law school since returning from Washington, I've been thrilled to begin a new collaboration with one of the law school's best and brightest professors, Eric Talley. In all of this, my network of enduring friends and former law partners and current banking partners, as well as my sister and sister-in-law and brothers-in-law, and my daughters, Joanna and Natalie, and most importantly, my wife, Carolyn, they've all been there to support me at every turn and to keep me from taking myself too seriously. That said, I have managed to make a modest career out of a muckraker's fascination with failure. Failure in the business sector, failure in the government sector, and out of a willingness, I don't know where this came from, to try to fix things that are broken. But in this, my education and training at Columbia have been the foundation on which, whether as a deal lawyer, an investment banker, or a public servant, I've analyzed a given business or policy problem and framed possible solutions. And I've learned an important life lesson along the way. Success and failure are each provisional, transitory. The wheel of fortune requires the best laid business plan or policy to be open to revision to account for changing circumstances, because circumstances always change. And so you have to indulge me a little bit here. I'm going to talk a little bit about the most fundamental change in circumstances over my lifetime, and that is, without question, climate change. I couldn't have anticipated at graduation where my Columbia Law degree would take me. But as climate change has become an undeniable force in our lives, I have found myself more and more engaged in putting my legal and finance background to work on strategies for our adaptation and survival. This has animated my work in the conservation and environmental movements and has become a greater part of my professional work and focus. I got to take a glass of water here. So the dean gave you a little intro to what we've been doing out in California, but I think it's an important illustration of the challenges that we are facing now and going to face in ever greater severity in the future. So let me tell you a little bit about this stuff. Wildfires have always been part of the landscape of the western United States, but California has experienced a wave of catastrophic wildfires over the last 5 years, the average losses from which have gone from about $1 billion a year in the first 15 years of this century to more than $8.5 billion a year over the last 5 years. These are damages large enough to have bankrupted their largest state utility, PG&E. So what changed? Well, the most salient statistical change is that sustained winds from storms blowing in off the Pacific now reach over 100 miles per hour versus the average of 50 miles an hour in the earlier century. In the face of these persistently higher wind speeds, California's electrical grid, built to withstand wind speeds of only up to 75 miles an hour, have proven to be extremely fragile. The new stronger winds snapping transmission and distribution lines, spreading the resulting sparks miles into the forest and across the grasslands, generating fires of frightening ferocity, which have devastated whole communities. The persistency of these increased wind speeds has enormous social and economic implications, which, to Governor Newsom's credit, he is proactively trying to address. First, California's utilities have to rebuild their transmission and distribution lines wholesale so they can withstand these stronger winds. The cost of burying the lines and hardening those where burial is uneconomic is estimated to be on the order of $50 billion, or half again as much of the total capital invested in these lines today. Second, while that work is being completed, which will take probably 10 years, catastrophic wildfires will no doubt continue to occur, threatening the human settlements in California that have pushed deeper and deeper into the forested portions of the state in pursuit of affordable housing, unavailable in major metropolitan areas. Third, as property and casualty insurers revise their loss models to account for the higher fire-related damage, insurance, where it is still available, has also become increasingly expensive, making it more difficult to get a mortgage in the affordable but higher risk parts of the state. So the question the governor posed to us was how to keep the utilities solvent so that they could continue to access the debt and equity markets to foot the enormous cost of upgrading their grids, and in the transition, still access funds to compensate the victims of the fires they are inevitably going to cause, without driving property and electricity rates for California businesses and residents through the roof. So the solution, as the dean hinted, was to create a state-sponsored catastrophic wildfire fund, to which each of the investor-owned utilities and each of the state-regulated insurance companies is contributing. We estimate that when you look at the way it's structured, those contributions will add up to $40 to $50 billion. And the theory of that is that we have spread out across we've socialized the cost of the future fires across the universe of ratepayers in California, as well as property owners and insurance premium payers. The theory of the case, though, is that the fund will be sufficiently capitalized to absorb the next 10 years' worth of fire damages, so that victims can be paid promptly, so as not to interrupt their lives any more than that fire will have interrupted their lives, and to keep the California economy from getting off track as a result of the devastation of wholesale communities. And that fund will allow, by absorbing those liabilities, will give investors in the utilities comfort that the utilities don't have to file for bankruptcy every time there's a big fire, and therefore they can access the credit markets in order to raise the funds to upgrade their networks. The policy solution to this climate change-related catastrophe isn't cheap. Between the capitalization of the fund and the cost of upgrading the grid, it's likely that the total bill to be absorbed by ratepayers, policyholders, and equity investors over the next decade will exceed $100 billion. So while decarbonization remains an absolutely critical effort in our energy and transportation policy, what this story illustrates is that the longer we wait to adapt to climate change, those that are the changes already with us, such as these catastrophic wildfires, and those that are just around the corner, the longer we wait, the greater the social dislocation and the higher costs we will face. The fundamental challenge is political. Do we have leaders willing to talk honestly about the problems we have created for ourselves? And can we muster the necessary political will to change our zoning and land use laws, our energy policies and utility regulations, and our transportation policies? Or are we going to wait for the next Superstorm Sandy to render significant parts of Queens, Brooklyn, Lower Manhattan, or on the West Coast, Silicon Valley and the LA Basin, or in the South, Louisiana and Florida, uninhabitable, in order to muster the political courage to do the necessary? In confronting this challenge, the law school has a truly important part to play, because the law is the common language we use to interpret causation, to allocate costs, and to establish precedents to guide us in an uncertain future. As for myself, I hope this little award is just a beginning, as I'm looking forward to having a small part in helping the law school play a larger role to help meet this existential challenge going forward. But in the meantime, I am deeply honored to be included in this august group of honorees, many of whom are here today, and I thank you very much.